Wolfpack, what's going on? It's your boy, the Wolf, Rose Street, RoseStreetJournal.com. We breed and feed you fantasy wolves. Here, thrilled to welcome on for the third time now, Peter Overzet at Peter Overzet on Twitter and YouTube. You can find all of his work, show schedule, and all the good stuff he's doing at PeterOverzet.com, which would include the ship chasing show, splash plays, LOLs, randomizer drafts, CTS, the Swolecast. I mean, there's just a million of them, and they're all phenomenal. He also is writing the daily Fantasy Life newsletter with Matthew Berry at the MB Fantasy Life. So some of the best, most insightful, but also entertaining content in the game. Pete, thanks so much for coming on again with me. How you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. I remember doing this show with you last year. It's funny to look back and see how different the best ball landscape is in the conversation. So
Right.
I'm liking this annual tradition with us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be great to talk through some of that, how things are changing, what the best strategies are for 2022, and how different that'll be in 2023 once we're doing this again, man. But yeah, I always appreciate it coming on. Why don't we say we just dive right in? So what we're going to do is do a draft live, and we'll chat through some of the big talking points, some of the lessons we learned last year through best ball and how we're applying them this year as we draft, hopefully, that $2 million winning team. Have you maxed out yet, Pete, as I get on into this draft? Are you at 150 or you still got a few left?
No, I still have a couple left. I've been trying to balance this thing where I did specifically want to save a handful of bullets, maybe 25 or 30 toward the very end, but I'm also moving this week and just have so much going on so that I don't want to get shut out either. So I've basically just been doing one or so a day and making sure that I get there. I think I'm at 118 or 119 right now.
Oh, nice. Good stuff. Yeah, I'm right at 86. I got a good few clips left in the holster to unload these next couple of weeks before school starts. So looking forward to doing that. And it looks like we got the 3 pick here. So we'll chat through some of that strategy and whatnot as this loads. But as we're doing that, Wolfpack, if you're here with us, you don't mind hitting that thumbs up button, shares, likes, retweets, all that good stuff does continue to help us grow and gain more Wolfpack members. So thanks again so much for being out here. So Pete, looks like we have the 3rd pick here. What are you thinking? Who's kind of the optimal? I love being in the top 4. I think it's the best spot to be drafting this year. Is there anybody you're ideally hoping falls to us here before we get started?
I'm a top 5 guy because I include Jamar Chase in there. So yeah, anytime I get a top 5 pick, I'm super stoked. And right now, sometimes even a top 6 pick, one of those guys will fall. I'm really okay with any of the top 5 guys. I have a ton of Cup and Chase, and I'm about even with the field on the other 3 guys. And I like them all. I really feel like you're flipping coins, splitting hairs. It's just personal preference.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, we'll see who falls. Taylor did go first. Are you hoping more receiver, even if McCaffrey falls? Is he the no-brainer if he makes it to us? What are your kind of thoughts on this one?
So in normal rooms, and this seems like a normal room, I don't recognize a lot of the names. I'm definitely willing to take CMC at this spot. In some rooms, and when I stream, they're so wide receiver heavy that I don't want to get left behind, but I'm down to do CMC here.
Let's do it. All righty. We'll start CMC, even though he's burned me a couple times 2 years in a row now. The upside's, inarguable, the best player in fantasy for whenever he's out on the field. So we'll roll with it. I have a ton of Cup already this year too. So I've been kind of fading CMC in a way. So I don't mind getting a few shares just in case we finally get a full 16 out of him, because it'd be pretty impossible to outscore that. So yeah, talking the early round strategy, then we went CMC, potentially a hero RB, maybe even hyper fragile, go a couple running backs, and then just avoid the position. Do you have a typical build or strategy that you like to follow? I know every draft's like a living, breathing organism, so you have to see how it goes. But do you have kind of typical ways you've been following your drafts, your best practices for these?
So I really do try. I mean, I know I'm known as the 0 RB guy, and I love my wide receivers, but I do really try to remain flexible early on in a draft. One of the things I've said is I think it's really hard to mess up a draft through the first 3 rounds, unless you're taking 2 quarterbacks or, doing something really crazy. And then to me, the question is, based on what you did earlier, can you build a really logical team? So right now with a Christian McCaffrey build, obviously, we're not going 0 RB. We have that anchor running back, but there's multiple paths we could go with this. We could take another running back early, maybe even 2 running backs early, and then say, hey, we're done with running backs. We're loading up on elite guys going with a hyper fragile strategy. Or
Yeah.
we could say, hey, the other elite running backs we like came off the board. Wide receivers are the best value. Let's do a true anchor build. And I'm perfectly comfortable with both of those. I'm also perfectly comfortable doing a hyper fragile build where you push it. Say you take a T. Higgins or AJ Brown here, say you grab a DJ Moore, and then say we get our anchor with ETN or Brees Hall in the fourth. And so I try to be really, really flexible. I have these bucket of strategies that I know work, but I really let the draft come to me, and then I kind of bend it to what I think is the optimal structure for this specific room.
Absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. Play with it on the fly, but have the builds and comfortable, that you're comfortable with in mind as well. Now, last year, you finished pretty damn high towards the end of the season on one of your builds, right? How high did you end up finishing on that team?
Yeah, a team I actually drafted on stream on my channel. You guys can find that at youtube.com/Peter Overzet. And I think if you search for Zero RB draft with Eric Beimfor over at Spike Week, we drafted on stream a true Zero RB team. We took Raheem Mostert, I believe, in the 8th round. He, of course, got injured on the first play of the game. So for all intents and purposes, I don't believe our first running back was until like the 11th with James Conner. But yeah, that team ended up finishing 10th in the top 10. I believe it was 8th overall for $25,000. And it was a super, super interesting team because one, it was zero RB, but two, it had none of the league winners from last year. No Jonathan Taylor, no Deebo Samuel, no Cooper Kupp, no Mark Andrews, no Josh Allen, none of them. It was just a team that had really good structure and then ultimately captured some of the really important spike weeks at the end from Jamar Chase, from Rashad Penny. So I do think it's a really interesting team to look at when you're trying to reverse engineer what kind of teams can make it to the top of these tournaments.
Oh yeah, that's great. I remember too. Didn't you take like Adams or somebody you took early that just kind of helped you differentiate a bit as well, something of that nature, right?
Yeah, and let's make this pick here. Yeah, I would say I'm still really high on Javonte. I don't know where you're at with him.
I love him.
And is AJ Brown still on the board? I'm trying to see who has the potential to come back to us in the
He
second.
ended up falling off here.
Wow.
Yeah, 16 overall, so he's going pretty early.
I kind of like how this sets up to go Javonte here and then maybe get a wide receiver in the 3rd.
We've drafted already once together this year. You've already seen my strategy with the running back, so I'm never going to say no to a nice green on the screen here for sure. But yeah, let's see who comes back to us. I've even seen, Mike Evans, who we still have here, falling back to 3 now, with people worried. Is there some news blurb, logs of full? Yeah, good news there. I'd love to see him fall. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the market, I kind of think Mike Evans should be a 3rd round pick. I think that early on, the kind of risk of, Godwin being fully healthy to start the season. I mean, he's been at practice. I mean, Tyreek Hill at 3-3 seems pretty nice to me.
Absolutely. I don't have a ton of him either, so I would love to start getting some of these players I don't have a lot of, continue to diversify the portfolio, as they might say. So yeah, Tyreek there, obviously a ton of spike week potential. You rank him above the Pittmans, the Keenans, the Mike Williams?
I do. Yeah. And it is tough for me to think through that situation because I cost adjusted, I like Waddle. So the way I approach Tyreek Hill in these drafts is like, even though I prefer Waddle to him, when you factor in the price, I don't want to have 0% Tyreek Hill. So basically how I approach it is I don't really take Tyreek Hill in the 2nd. But when he falls in the 3rd, and obviously I think this was a sweet spot for wide receiver. Higgins is one of my favorite targets in this range. He goes. So if you're giving us a slipping Tyreek Hill, and I do think there's kind of a tier break after Higgins and Hill before you get to the Mike Williams, Pittman, Keenan. So to me, that just felt like a good value scoop. And like you said, if you're going to get your exposure to a guy you're not quite as high on, might as well do it when he's a little cheaper.
Love it. Absolutely. So yeah, we'll see how this goes again. We'll pick, if you're tuned in, we went running back, then Tyreek Hill. So McCaffrey, Javonte. I am a big fan of Javonte. It's certainly, Melvin Gordon talking about how the wheels will be turned now over, the keys to this backfield to Javonte. Do you see this? Like, obviously the beat speculation, one day it's 70-30, the next it's like 57.5 and 35.5 too. So is there a way you kind of see this going in this backfield unfolding?
With Javonte and Melvin? Yeah. It's so the thing with me too, and I think what kind of gets lost in a lot of the conversation about players like Javonte Williams, like players like Gabriel Davis, is people, when you look at median projections, they aren't going to project incredible. But the way this tournament is structured, where you're essentially trying to win 3 individual GPP DFS style tournaments in a row, 15, 16, 17, we really do need high end, crazy spike week outcome. And what we're trying to do, and the market's actually pretty good at pricing this with Javonte Williams. I think in previous years, everyone has said, hey, he's in a 50-50 timeshare. You can't take him here. But we know his talent profile. We know how efficient and explosive he is. We know that this Broncos offense is going to be even better this year. And so when you start to think of the ways Javonte Williams could be a bell cow back by the end of the season, whether through injury or he's just so good that the team can't afford to have Melvin Gordon on the field over him, it becomes clear why he's such a good pick in this format. And so even though I do think it might be a little tough sledding out of the gate, Melvin Gordon hanging around, I think you could see a very similar dynamic that we saw with Jonathan Taylor last year, where he was kicking around in the second round. People were worried about Nyheim Hines, but eventually these guys who are this good, the team can't keep them off the field. And I think that's what's going to happen with Javonte Williams.
Absolutely. And maybe it's just that good of an offense. It can sustain him to be, serviceable for those first few weeks, a dependable running back that's like, okay, and then the spikes end up coming. I love that idea. He had 28 points in his one game without Gordon last year. So there's definitely some spike upside to him. His efficiency. Yeah, you mentioned Jonathan Taylor, like they weren't that far off in some of those big metrics. All right, we're getting close here to our pick in round 4. We have Tyreek Hill. Want me to just pull up here and see, you looking at receivers here?
I've started to get pretty excited about Judy. If Judy falls to us, he seems like a fun pick. And now we have kind of this big bet on the Broncos. Judy does go. I'm still completely fine with Deontay Johnson here. He's been slipping because of the George Pickens stuff. I don't necessarily think George Pickens breaking out is like mutually exclusive with Deontay still having a massive season.
Yep. Yeah. 100%. So we'll snag him for now. I'm with you. People acting like the corpse of Big Ben was actually the reason for Deontay's success. I mean, sure, he locked onto him and had a low ADOT, and that's all he could throw it for. But the guy gets open at will. He's going to be, whether it's Trubisky, Pickett, who looks phenomenal this preseason. I mean, he could have a higher ceiling than people realize than last year, elevated from some better QB play, even with Pickens. Two different style players. I'm with you.
For sure.
So yeah, absolutely.
So what are your thoughts normally here? I pretty much always grab one of Waller or Kittle when they're in the 5th. I know there's some concerns about Waller's health a little bit right now. What are your thoughts on those guys? Because I think they just represent so much upside at this price.
Yeah, 51 especially. I'm all good with Waller. A little bit maybe over Kittle. As good as Kittle is in those spike weeks might be, it seems like a condensed kind of passing share there. So I really like Waller. The only guy I'd other considered might be Amon. I don't know where you fall on him, but that late season stretch run was huge. But I'm down to go whichever way you think here, Amon or Darren.
I love Amon-Ra, but I think structurally getting that elite tight end, because I think there's a big gap after Waller and Kittle till the next guys.
Yeah.
And what it just does is just gives you so much flexibility with your draft. And this goes back to kind of the conversation about Javonte Williams and Gabe Davis. With these tight ends, you're going to be in these groups, these large groups, trying to get first place to advance. And there's only a handful of tight ends in the league that can put up 25 plus points. Like, it does not matter. I love Gerald Everett. I like Tyler Higbee. Some of these guys I like, they are not capable in those offenses of putting up 25 plus points in a game. They just don't have that within their range of outcomes as a player. And so to know that you could separate from the field at a 1Z position there, where essentially everyone else might be averaging around 10 to 11 points, and you could be having that spike week from a Waller or Kittle. And we've seen both of them do it. To me, I think that just represents such a huge edge within this specific structure. And I kind of understand more hesitations with them in managed leagues and stuff like that. But in Best Ball Mania 3, I really love getting one of those 5 elite tight ends.
Yeah, and I think last year, wasn't Andrews kind of going in this range as well? And he ended up being, nobody was more crucial in the fantasy playoffs, maybe not, or the best ball playoffs rather, to getting there. So Waller could have that type of rebound season in him, the quote unquote Gronk role in the McDaniels offense. I get the condensed target share with now Adams there, Renfro out of the slot. But yeah, the spike upside there is huge. And then maybe he's the guy that helps carry us. And I remember Liam, who won it last year, he he got carried there, but then he also had the tight end like late that differentiated with Noah Fant or something, I think it was, that put him over the edge. So
he
yeah,
was
exactly.
he was one of the only ones, and that's then goes to the other thing, and this happens with the anchor RBs. It happens with some of those tight ends. Is there's this natural selection bias to the teams that advance, and teams have very similar players. And you were referencing at the start when on that team that I had finished top 10 last year, we did reach for Devontae Adams at 103 because it allowed us to get a couple wide receivers paired with him that most drafters didn't have access to. And in the video I made on my Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel about some ways to get unique, like we looked at what was a chalk start, which last year was Christian McCaffrey from the 101 with Justin Jefferson and George Kittle. And it wasn't because people are like, those guys are correlated or they were playing against each other. It was just their ADPs lined up that in that pocket. And so there were over 500 instances of that exact 3-person start. The start that Eric and I had, which was Devontae, CeeDee Lamb, and Keenan, there were only 11 total instances of that because people who drafted Adams were usually doing it at the end of the round 1, and Keenan and CeeDee were round 2, 3 turn players. And so it is a little galaxy brain. It's getting a little cute, but when you think about the difference of 500 plus teams versus 11, it starts to become a pretty important factor.
Absolutely. That's like that. The DFS mindset comes into the factor there too. You have to have the lower owned guys. That's a lower owned build in a sense. People had those guys, just the combination of them was so unique. So yeah, that's a really good point here. And you just mentioned an important strategy. I know you've talked a ton on your channel again at Peter Overzet. Go find all that content about week 17 correlations. So you probably know these, and I know you have a great tool that kind of highlights certain week 17 correlations and whatnot, but are there certain players, like when do you start really starting to factor that in and considering those things?
Yeah, and I know like early on in the offseason, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen were going a lot at the beginning of round 3 because people were correlating them with Cooper Kupp and playing for that week 17. I think week 17 is incredibly important, but I also don't force anything here early on. I like both of these wide receivers you have in the queue. I'm good with either Ayuk or London.
Well, I think Ayuk correlates with Darren Waller, the key tight end and receiver correlation there for a potential shootout, right? So, 49ers, Raiders, why not let that be our deciding factor here? But yeah, continue on.
Yeah, and so I was just going to say this is the range where I start to use it as a tiebreaker. I'm not reaching ever more than a round, for correlation. But I do really think it is an important thing to be thinking about. And it goes back to, for people who don't kind of know what we're talking about, in week 17, it's a 470 person final. You're going to need to finish top 2 to win $1 million prize in that final. And so if you think about it, you can reverse engineer it like a DFS lineup. And it's like, what kind of, I almost wonder, I think we should maybe not lose Russell Wilson here with our Judy and Javonte.
We didn't end up getting Judy. So
we didn't get Judy. My bad. Sorry.
He was the pick right before us. I would have loved having him for sure.
Then let's sit on quarterback. I'm good with Kirk or Hopkins. Look nice to me.
Okay. Yeah. Either one. I mean, Renfro. Yeah. Should we go all in on the Raiders and get Renfro and like Carr on the way back? Or you think Kirk or Hopkins big edge?
I don't really prioritize Renfro. I think Kirk and Hopkins have the chance to be much bigger hits.
Sweet. We'll go with Hopkins. Then we already have 3, and then hopefully inject a wide receiver 1 into our lineup if he hits it on all cylinders coming back. So nice. Good build for so far. But yeah, so you're chatting week 17. I'm trying to remember where we left off on that conversation. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so you're thinking of it like if I said to you, all right, you don't have to go through the gauntlet to get there. You just get to make a team for week 17 against 470 people. What would that lineup look like? You literally get to handpick your lineup. Obviously, you'd pick some of the best players, but then you'd start to have some stacks. You'd say, hey, I want to get Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Right. Oh, and if Mahomes and Travis Kelce go off, well, they're playing Denver. Maybe I want Javonte Williams scoring on the other side. And so when you think of it through that angle, it then does become pretty clear we kind of want to optimize for this. And then the pushback you'll get is, well, you got to get to week 17 first, which is entirely true. But to realize the expected value and all the money is up top, that it's almost not even worth it trying to optimize just to squeak into the playoffs if you don't have a team that can realistically get to the top. And so that's kind of the ultimate push-pull, is I'm willing to sacrifice maybe advancing more teams if it means I'm advancing a couple teams that have a true shot to take down first place.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, absolutely. We're not in it to, double our money and make it to the next round and pat ourselves on the back for having a quarter of our teams advance. We just want that one lottery ticket that takes down 2 million. I guess it's a only slight wrinkle in this year for the Best Ball Mania 3. They do have the $1 million prize for the season long winner, but you're competing with so many people for that one. You have to be pretty much perfect. You have to have the nuts to win that one. So that's a tricky thing to shoot for. Does that factor at all into your strategy, or are you just much more a week 17 purist?
No, I think, like I said, I don't want to go out of my way. The way Mike Leone made this point really well in some Twitter conversation where he's like, if you're correlating at ADP, and we know there's studies that show, Jack Miller over at ETR did a great study showing when you are reaching more than a round, you're kind of hemorrhaging points and hurting your team. So if you're correlating without reaching more than a round, it's a free roll, right? Because you're not making a suboptimal pick. You're still picking within that ADP comfort zone. But then on top of it, you're getting a correlation boost in week 17. So it's not even hurting you. It's just a cherry on top if you get there. And so that's kind of really how I've approached it. And I think early on, maybe people were getting a little overzealous with the correlating. And don't get me wrong, it's very fun to do, but I really try to let it come to me in drafts and be a good tiebreaker when you're trying to decide between a couple of guys.
Absolutely. And now, so we're up in a few here. You mentioned Broncos face the Chiefs. We already have Javante, so that could be a interesting way to get a little week 17 correlation. I don't know if any of these running backs start to catch your eye, or we quarterbacks seem to have all gone pretty. There's Stafford here and the elbow still lingering. We do have Waller and Carr, so we might want to lock something up that way.
I think we definitely get Sky, and then I think we got to make Carr a priority with our next pick
on the way back. Perfect. I like the game plan there. All right, and what about? I know this is completely off the top we were talking about, but the Bills backfield, it could be so juicy, but now Zach Moss is starting to get involved as well. So it makes it just a little bit extra hideous. I can't tell if I want a lot of that or if I just completely avoid it. I started going quite hard on James Cook early in the offseason, but now it's becoming a 3-headed nightmare. I don't know how I take that one. I know it's a random question, but what are your thoughts on the Bills? The back?
Yeah, I like all three of them, which I know sounds kind of funny, but I think about them in different contexts. And let's hope we can get Derek Carr here, and then we can talk about the Bills backfield. But so the way I think about it is I do a lot of zero RB builds, and Devin Singletary is a guy that I really like with those builds because I think he's going to have a roll out of the gate. We know the Bills are going to be in the red zone a ton, scoring opportunities. So he's a guy I feel comfortable that's just going to get me a baseline level of points in a really high scoring offense. So I like him in zero RB builds. Also in zero RB builds, but more in maybe swing for the fences anchor builds, I love James Cook just because we know rookie running backs in general have the chance to, really outperform their draft position. And James Cook has a wide range of outcomes, right? Like, could he have an Alvin Kamara-esque rookie year? Yes, that's within the range of outcomes. Could he also just be in the doghouse and never really see the field and go the way of like Duke Johnson in this Bills offense? That could happen too, but that's why there's such good picks in a tournament format. So he's my swing for the fences pick. And now, like you said, with the team continually saying, hey, Zach Moss is not dead. He's going to have a role. Obviously, we think that role will be in short yardage situations around the goal line. He's a guy I like tacking on as an 18th round pick in some of these drafts. I think he plays well at the underdog scoring settings as well. Half point PPR. He's not going to catch passes. If he does hit, it's going to be because he falls into the end zone twice on a given week. So I kind of like these offenses that are so big and explosive. I just want pieces of them. And I think all three of the running backs, like to me, none of them are horribly mispriced or, too expensive. So I kind of like shots at all of them.
Absolutely. That all makes sense. And you started talking about rookies. We took Sky Moore, James Cook just went. We see Pickens come off the board, one of the surging ADPs of this offseason, and deservedly so, it seems. Olave was just here. And I think you kind of alluded to why rookies are so valuable, especially towards the stretch run here. But do you find yourself targeting rookies more often than maybe the typical drafter would?
I do. Yeah, I really do, because they're the market has gotten so good. The ADPs specifically on Underdog are so efficient. And what I think they're efficient at is pricing players for median projections. Like when you do median projections, like the Underdog market sorts those so well. Like I can't quibble with a lot of that. But the thought exercise I always use is if we created our draft board for weeks 10 through 17 or 13 through 17, how would that look? And who are the players that we see year after year gain a ton of value by the end of the season? I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't do anything for the first 10, 11 weeks of the season last year and then came on massive. And so it's hard for the market to fully price that. They want to bake in, hey, there's uncertainty. What if this guy busts? What if this guy, is benched for the first half of the season? That's all good and well, but we're trying to win a tournament where all the prize money is decided weeks 15 through 17. Yeah. And so guys like rookies, guys that are suspended like DeAndre Hopkins, guys that are injured like Chris Godwin, these guys all present value discounts relative to what they can do at the end of the season when it matters most. And that's really the only inefficiency in the market because everyone else is priced so fairly.
Yeah, that makes sense. One of the few edges you can gain if and when they hit, and they often will hit in that late season stretch. So a guy like Sky Moore, I think, we got him about 8 picks or so after where he's going. The recent preseason buzz, he's behind Justin Watson. But man, like as you mentioned, Amon-Ra St. Brown scores 25 points in 4 of his last 6 weeks and just carries regular fantasy teams and also best ball teams to titles. Like that's what you're playing for is Sky Moore there. James Cook, if something ever happened. I mean, Zach Moss isn't even a bad one. If something happened to Singletary down the stretch and he's scoring 2 touchdowns a week like Singletary did himself last year. So that I think we got to queue him up for our last round potentially now that we've talked about him enough. What are your thoughts here? Since we have Carr, I don't know if you like the idea of if Stafford or Cousins falls to us, we kind of lock up a nice QB2. Do we just continue to hammer rookies like Garrett Wilson like we were talking about? Do we go after Yeah, what do you think?
Let's look at our wide receivers because I normally try to think through what are some of my other stacking potential. Do I think I could get away with it in a 2 QB or 3 QB build? So a couple things I'm thinking about here. Tua with Tyreek, I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, the way Kenny Pickett is playing right now, I'm open to like a 3 QB build with him super late. Obviously, the other players we've taken are off the board. I'm kind of inclined to skip out on a Rodgers and Stafford does go. I love both the guys you highlighted, Rondale Moore and Garrett Wilson. So either of those guys and then kind of playing for Tua maybe in the next round or even the round after that makes sense to me.
All righty. I'll roll with Rondale now just we do have Hopkins, and even when Hopkins is back, they're talking about more of the 4 wide air raid, which means he might not be obsolete. It's a nice stopgap to get us to Hopkins and then potentially still carries on with some value. They did lose Chase Edmonds. What if he gets more backfield snaps? So I'm a big Rondale fan. For sure. Now we're looking at, so I did queue up Tua. We could, I mean,
I think we sit on him.
I think we sit on
him another round. Yeah.
Now, is there anybody else? I mean, do we go for Rachaad White and like correlate with Christian McCaffrey and hope like Fournette's down or Darrell Henderson? I do really like as well.
Either of those 2 running backs you have there, Darrell Henderson or Rachaad White, I think this is a really nice spot to grab a running back 3.
Perfect. I'll go after White then just to, play that correlation card of him versus McCaffrey. I don't know if you necessarily have to correlate running backs, but hey, points are points. You want the shootout atmosphere. And maybe he has that David Johnson rookie season type of stretch run here. I'll highlight a couple more running backs we could potentially look at. I know Robinson's been a huge riser these last few weeks, but a kind of hideous situation. But we'll move to the top of the queue. Hope he kind of makes his way back. Is there any other names that like as we're in this kind of this round 10 funk here, is there any names you typically find yourself targeting?
Yeah, this is like, I find this to be the sweet spot for running back. I mean, Michael Carter goes really early here at 127.
He usually lingers.
Yeah, I think his ADP is like 149. So that's interesting. But I do find this to be a really sweet pocket for running backs, either a 0 RB build, you're grabbing them, or in our case, we kind of have a double anchor build. The thing I'm thinking about with this build for us is Christian McCaffrey, Javonte Williams, Rachaad White. I'm always wondering, could this potentially be a 4 running back build? It's probably a 5 running back build, but if we were to get like a Henderson or Gainwell, I think you could make an argument it to be a 4 running back build.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see who falls back to us. Certainly Henderson too. I'd love either of them. Do you target Robinson at all after this preseason? Is he still the Commanders backfield gross stuff? Don't want anything to do with it.
I'm kind of out on him at this price for a couple reasons. One, I did grab him a decent amount in the 16th, 17th, and 18th early on. 2, I feel like I just worry about what his upside scenario is. If the Washington offense was better and you could sell me on him having a lot of goal line opportunities, maybe I could see it. But it's like, as much as we joke about Antonio Gibson, like he's not going away. Even if he's a change of pace back, he's still getting 8 to 10 touches a game. And JD McKissic is getting all the pass work. So I just don't know how Brian Robinson on even 10 to 15 touches a game is going to be a smash without the Washington offense being much better than advertised.
Yeah. I don't know that Wentz is going to be able to do that. So I'm with you there. I think his price, especially you have to factor in, I guess, thinking about the fact that he was going at 180 just 3 weeks ago or so, and there's going to be teams that had him that cheap. Does that ever factor in your play? Like with these surging players when they were going 50 picks ago, Dameon Pierce is one of those guys right now too. Do you ever factor that in, guys that were going so late just not too long ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it in two ways. One, there's just your own personal like sticker shock, right? Where like the Brian Robinson's a good one. I don't think it's bad to grab a player in this context. I mean, an example of where I think it would be bad would be last year with the Cam Akers injury, Darrell Henderson. We were grabbing him in the 14th, 15th. All of a sudden, he's going in the 4th or 5th. Like that is such an extreme price. Like when you have Darrell Henderson in the 4th, and my teams have him in the 15th. You're playing from way behind. But if we're talking about Brian Robinson at pick 170 versus pick 130, I mean, even after pick 100, a lot of these guys are pretty low probability bets. So I don't think it's a huge thing. But I go back and forth. Like a guy that I've been chasing up is I drafted a ton of KJ Hamler late, and I've been drafting him still at pick 150 because Tim Patrick went down, and I think he's still a value there. So I don't think we've had a player who's moved up so far that he's become, prohibitive to draft in this contest.
Gotcha. Yep. Hamler's still there. We do have some Broncos already, so that could be a name we end up looking at. I mean, we did lose out on Tua. He did just go. Quarterbacks have been flying in this one, which I don't know. I'm okay with losing him out if he's going to go that early. That's fine with me.
And this is where I start to think, okay, well, maybe this could be a 3 quarterback build. If we got to it, could have probably been a 2 quarterback build. And so we can start to think like, all right, maybe we do something with like Baker and Christian McCaffrey. Maybe we do. But yeah, let's go back here.
Madison did fall pretty far.
Madison at this price, I see Madison's the exact kind of pick I love to make on like CMC and early running back teams, because it's like, we're not going to need his production. And the way he hits is like, if Dalvin Cook gets hurt, now all of a sudden he's in our lineup. And so I really like him in the hyper fragile and double anchor builds.
Perfect. Love it as well. And I like this idea of going 3 QBs later. We don't need to reach on Baker, any of those guys now. 2 of the receivers I was hoping might fall to us were McKenzie and Collins, and they just go back to back. I like both of them, but I also do really like Hamler here. It kind of balances out our Broncos, Chiefs mini stacks to the end. You think that's the play here? Or is there anybody else catching your eye?
Yeah, I'm trying to see here. I'm having a hard time with, I love playing the Patriots through, Kendrick Bourne, a little later. Kenny Golladay, I like playing it through Wan'Dale Robinson. So yeah, I'm kind of with you on that. I mean, this is where I come. Yeah, I'm always like, well, I think Hamler is the best pick here.
I'm in. I like it. I like Hamler a lot too. I've been stacking them up late. So yeah, we got at this point where we're looking at 7 receivers, 4 running backs, 1 tight end. I don't think we need more than a second since we went Waller early, and a few QBs late. If we're looking at how many picks do we have left here? About 5. Yeah, so 5 left. Thinking 2 of those will be shots on QB, and then just kind of figuring it out from there.
We know 2 will be QB. We know at least 1 will be tight end. So that's 3 there. And so that leaves us with 2 more. One's obviously, I think, a wide receiver to get us to 8. And then this is where I think you probably have a luxury pick. We could go to 5 RBs, 9 wide receivers, 3 tight ends. Like, I don't think either of those would be. I don't do a lot of 3 QB, 3 tight end builds. I don't really like doing it with an elite tight end. But I think it's in the conversation if like we have a tight end that really falls and we just think he's the best value. I don't think it's egregious.
Perfect. Well, let's maybe queue up some players here in terms of late round QBs. I know you mentioned we could potentially stack Baker with McCaffrey. I do like Davis Mills. I don't know if we have any reason to go after him, but I love him as like a last round stab. Are there any of the other names up here though? Winston Jones, Mac Jones, I guess correlates with Tyreek Hill in ways with the week 17. Jared Goff. I don't know. Is there any of these late round QBs you find yourself gravitating towards?
Well, specifically in this Deontay Johnson one, I think Pickett in the
Oh
fact
yeah,
that he could, I mean, he looks like their best quarterback.
looks
The team
great.
invested a first round pick in him. They need to see what they have. I mean, I was taking him even when they were saying, Mason Rudolph or Trubisky could be starting, just because, again, you could tell how I view everything through this lens of who's going
Right.
to be playing in week 17. And so if Pickett's going to be even starting closer to the start of the season, like, I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I like that too. And he could probably be our last round pick as well. So we can kind of just pencil him in for those last 2 rounds. And you mentioned Wandale, getting some of these more rookies that could hit later on the season. I do also like Alec Pierce in that conversation as well. I really like his upside in that Colts offense. Paris Campbell always goes down. It's just a matter of when, not if, at this point. So I like Alec Pierce a lot. I think Marvin Jones is just kind of like gross, but gets it done in a way. He'll be in our lineup a few weeks, so he could be intriguing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else. Like maybe we get Hunter Henry as a little correlation with the Dolphins again, and just kind of wrap up our second tight end. What's some thoughts of these guys that are currently available?
Yeah, the Hunter Henry with Waller pairing is one I would feel really good about for just a 2 tight end build. I think Henry, I liked Henry before. I mean, I was pretty high on Tyquan Thornton. He was one of my favorite flyers. He's going to miss at least 8 weeks with the collarbone. Not that like Tyquan Thornton was really stealing a role from Hunter Henry, but anything that opens up more targets for him, I think is a bonus. And I just think he's going to have a big red zone presence. He does go there, so that's off the table, but I think he's a nice value at pick 162.
I do too. Yeah. I was really hoping he might make his way to us, but I am a fan of Wandale. All the training camp MVP hype. I like the Giants in general, just as a team that's going to suck and probably need to chuck. So I like them. Who do the Giants have weeks? Is it the Colts in week 17?
The Giants play the Colts, yes.
Yeah, okay. So I don't know if we have much correlated there, but I just am intrigued. And then he goes, maybe Alec Pierce if he falls, because none of these quarterbacks are guys that we necessarily will need right now.
No. And the other nice thing about Pierce is it would open up Matt Ryan potentially as a third in a 3 QB build as well.
Yeah, I think he just
or did he go?
Yeah, he did just go. And I do like him as like a late QB2 target with the pace. But yeah, he's gone. So we can look elsewhere indeed. But I mean, what about Jameson? Like, he kind of fits the mold of those guys you were talking about, and then that might open up Goff in a little bit, or we already have 8 receivers. I don't know that we necessarily need to hammer anymore. Is there anybody else on the board? There's Joke who just went. There's Higbee. Yeah,
I do think this represents the end of kind of like a tight end tier where I'd be perfectly fine still with Higbee, Fant, and Hurst. And specifically Higbee and Fant as kind of our second tight end with Waller. So to me, the value pocket here looks pretty good for tight end. Then we're done there. And then we know we can basically use our last 3 picks on probably 2 quarterbacks and a running back.
Perfect. Yeah. So why don't we, you have a preference between Higbee and Hurst?
Do we have,
I'm trying to think
we don't have any Jets or did Fant go?
Fant is here. Fant's there as well. Is he your?
I'm good with Higbee or Fant.
Okay, I will say I'm more of a Higbee fan. The Seahawks are kind of off my list for the most part, unless I've gone Breece Hall early and want to correlate.
Yeah,
I haven't done much Seahawks, and he's running. I don't know. What do you make of him running with like deep into the second half and Disley being ahead of him and things like that? I don't know. It just seems a little strange to me.
Yeah, it's tough because I do really think Fant is just incredibly talented. But to your point, we've also seen Pete Carroll use like a tight end by committee throughout his entire stuff. So I think that's a fair criticism. I think the thing that's kind of exciting about Fant is he does have some yards after the catch juice where he can create some plays on his own. Whereas Tyler Higbee, he's one of those more kind of catch and fall down guys, but better offense, more red zone opportunities. I think they're both mispriced. I find that entire tight end tier like from Dalton Schultz to Tyler Higbee to almost be perfectly flat. Like honestly. So when I always feel good when I'm catching the end of that tier.
Absolutely. That's one. I know we went Waller there. It's one of the only reasons I was considering a receiver there too, is because I don't mind hammering 3 of those tight ends towards the end of my draft. A Higbee, a Hurst, even like a Hooper might see, 100 targets in that offense with all the vacancies there. So I've often found myself going really late at tight end, but I do love Waller typically going around 4 to fall to us in 5 and have that 20-point upside. There's only 5 tight ends that could match that. So I like what we did there at the position. Now we can cut it at 2, not have to worry about it. So we know, 2 of our last 3 here are going to go quarterback. I guess we have that luxury pick. So I don't know if anybody is standing out to you, of this group. Is McKissick because he's just usable at running back? We only have 4 of them.
So my thought here is I would kind of just prioritize our quarterbacks, because one thing I really try to do with my late running back selections now is try to get a guy that's not getting drafted in every draft.
Yeah.
Because I think like after round 15, all of these running backs are pretty wide open. And so if anything, then what's the one thing we could do to differentiate? Maybe get a guy that's not going in every one. So, a guy like JD McKissick, he's fine. He does go here, but he's drafted in, I would guess, 98% or more of these BBM3. And so I think with a team like this, where we do have pretty good running backs, we can take kind of an off the wall guy, a Zach Moss-esque player who might have, yeah, we could throw him in there and we could go dumpster diving and seeing any other names that interest us. But yeah, I think I'd kind of say, let's grab our 2 QBs and then we can kind of go off the board here with our final running back selection.
Perfect. And so when we look at these quarterbacks, then we'll look at some off the cusp running backs who might not be getting drafted. I've got a few names I'd love to toss out to you there. But at quarterback, this is where it could kind of become that debate of, whereas like I feel a lot better about Goff as a QB2 than I do. Well, Baker just went. So like, would you have prioritized Baker though, had he been there, just for the sake of the stack? Or do you still occasionally go with like the player you feel just better about?
I do generally try to get some sort of stack. So I'd even maybe think about just knowing like how these quarterbacks are flying off the board. I would almost just put Kenny Pickett at the top of our queue, just to make sure we get him. And then I would try to think through, all right, we're probably not going to be able to get another quarterback with a stack. Is there a running back or quarterback combination that we could get a little bit more correlation? One thing, another off the ball or off the board running back I've been taking is Jaylen Warren, who it sounds like might have the inside track. So one thing would be like, all right, we go Pickett and Warren. No one's going to take Warren, and see, Goff does go. So I think we definitely take Pickett here. We can't like mess around with it.
Right.
But we could maybe even just do a naked third QB. Or let's look at some of these names. Like this to me would be the perfect opportunity to take a huge swing on a Malik Willis or a Desmond Ridder, even a Marcus Mariota, if we wanted to get some more early season production. So with these guys, if we're going for a running back or a running quarterback or really high upside, I don't think it's the end of the world that we have them unstacked as our QB3.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I like going after those, the Falcons guys, one of them in particular. Should we just hammer Warren here, even though he's probably not going to go anyways?
He's not going to go. We can get which quarterback we want.
Any of the 3? I'd say one of the Falcons. Do you have a leaning to whichever one?
I've been taking Ridder, but I kind of been wanting to boost my Mariota because I think this offense might just be like surprisingly good. And he's going to run so much that I feel like the Mariota Pickett combo is a pretty nice one.
Yeah, that's true. Because it kind of the early season, if we have to wait at all for Pickett, which we might not. I mean, he's looked so damn good that he might be the week 1 starter. He sure deserves it, I think.
And here's another fun thing too with our correlation. So we do have 2 Arizona guys. So we are still alive for a scenario where Arizona, Atlanta playing week 17, our wide receivers are scoring and Mariota's running for his life. That could still work out.
Really could. Well, is there, maybe this is pure galaxy, but if we were to pass on Warren, I love Warren. I've actually been starting to sneak him into a lot of drafts here to wrap things up. But would you ever consider going both Ridder and Mariota, or are you just only hoping for that ceiling outcome of like, I'm playing as if I got it right and Mariota is just keeping him on the bench all year type of thing.
So I don't do that normally. If I
Yeah.
did do it, it would be as a third quarterback situation where it's like we took Carr, Ritter, and Mariota. I
Yeah.
kind of get it there from from that standpoint, but in a 4 quarterback thing, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. It'd be pretty gross. I feel you. So yeah, I think we're kind of lasered in on Warren, but while we wait for him to fall
Another
to us, yeah.
I'll toss out one more. Like if we did want that, I think is actually pretty comparable to Warren. Damian Williams would be the pass catching back in Atlanta. And he came out second on their depth chart, the one that hilariously had Tyler Algier there. So the thought on Damian Williams would be if Cordero Patterson gets hurt or if, he gets pushed to more of a wide receiver role or whatever have you, like Tyler Algier does not profile as a great pass catching back. Damian Williams, we've seen him. We've seen him do that in Kansas City. We saw him do it with the Bears. And so again, this kind of idea of like, all right, let's correlate with our last 2 picks. We're also getting a guy that's not drafted in probably less than 5% of leagues. And sure, it's a thin outcome, but it's a luxury last round selection that's correlated and really low owned. And those are the kind of picks I like to make deep.
I think that's a great one to toss out there, especially with the Mariota pick. Yeah. And Williams does, and even last year on the hideous Bears, he made, he saw extended time in about 2-3 games. He had 16 to 20 points in him. I mean, he always seems to just get it done when he gets called upon. So he'd be an interesting one. Do you have, assuming they're both there, Jaylen Warren and Williams, do you have a preference between the two?
The kind of correlation bro in me that doesn't want to have a naked Mariota has me kind of leaning Williams. I think they're very similar bets.
Yeah.
Because Williams still has to contend with CPAT. Jaylen Warren could still, like, if Najee went down, the reality is Warren probably splits with Benny Snell. So I think they're both kind of galaxy brain. So I'm good with either though. I like both in this build.
All righty, nice. I kind of like Warren just a bit more because yes, they probably split time, but if you're thinking upside scenarios, like Williams, his highest ceiling is now he's the pass catching back because CPAT goes down, and like that's some value. But what if Tomlin's like, I really love this Warren kid. Yeah. I've always had a bell cow, like, and Najee goes down, you might have a 25 touch guy. You know what I mean? So I like that. Plus the Pickett, like, it's somewhat correlated too. So I'm going to go Warren there as a wrap up. I feel a little bit better than him. I do like the Williams case there though too. So yeah, that wraps it up. Let's give me a grade on the final team that we put together here. McCaffrey 1, Williams 2, Javonte, that is, Tyreek Hill 3, Deontay 4, Darren Waller 5, Ayuk 6. Hold on one sec. Let's get back. I'm up to 88 now. Nice.
There you go.
So if the fiance is not watching today. All righty. And then we got Waller, Ayuk, Hopkins 7, Moore 8. Thought that was a nice value there. Carr to correlate with or stack up our Waller. Rondale, Rashad White, Madison in 10, 11, 12. KJ Hamler, love that one. The Broncos Chiefs potential shootout in week 17. Pierce, Higbee, Pickett, Mariota, Warren. Quite a different final 3 than I've certainly done, but I get the logic behind them all as well. What are your thoughts on the final squad, Pete? Give me your honest assessment before we let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I love a lot of our player selections. I think this draft is kind of illustrates what I was saying at the top, where you don't want to go in with a set plan. We could have reached for Tua to get our stack early, but we would have been reaching some 16 picks ahead of ADP for a quarterback that, for all intents and purposes, is probably going to be a mid-tier quarterback. And so I like that we were patient, and it does go to show you, even if your league mates box you out of a certain build, there are still avenues in every which direction. And every pick you make, you're building in strength at that position. And so, yes, we didn't get quite the QB strength, but what did we do? We made up for that at the end of the draft with 2 guys that we think have both early season and late season upside. And so I just like the idea of no matter what doors get closed, you can build a logical team late. And I also love what we were able to do to kind of get some correlation there. We built out a really interesting low-owned Steelers stack. I mean, Kenny Pickett's not getting drafted in all of these. Jaylen Warren's rarely getting drafted. And now we have a really unique stack there. So this team accomplishes a lot of the goals that I have when I do these drafts.
Awesome. Well, Pete, thank you so much. If you guys want to learn more about best ball drafting, I know you're going live quite often with these. You want to just remind the listeners where they can find you and your work? Anything you'd like to promote before we let you go?
Yeah, I do. I do a couple best ball streams a week, although it's crazy. We're nearing the end here, so only
Yeah,
a
we
couple
are.
more weeks of these. I do a Monday morning best ball breakfast stream where I stream a best ball mania draft on my channel. I do a show with Chris Spags called Splash Play, and we've just been streaming drafts all season long. And yeah, been writing about best ball strategy throughout the summer in the Fantasy Life newsletter. I highly recommend subbing to that. It's completely free. We're in your inbox 5 days a week, and just a really great blend of news, strategy, fun stuff, lots of great contributors. So yeah, for some reason, no one subscribed to that yet. I highly recommend it. And then if some of these kind of like more macro strategy stuff, I've made 3 different strategy videos on my channel, and we kind of touched on a lot of them. One is zero RB and the secrets to best ball. That's all about the structures we've been talking about: zero RB, anchor RB, hyper fragile. Then I did the video week 17 is all that matters. That's talking about the correlation and how we kind of want to approach this from a DFS mindset. And then the most recent video I did was on the players to target. And we were talking about some of those undervalued guys, the rookies, the injured, suspended players. So I put a lot of work into those videos. They're not streams, they're pre-recorded, they're scripted, have lots of good information. And you can find those on the Peter Overzet Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel.
Perfect. Well, make sure you check that out, viewers, listeners. Pete, thank you again so much time. I know it's a busy time of the year, so I really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hop on. It's always a pleasure talking ball and picking your brain. So thanks again, my man.
For sure, man. This was fun.
Awesome. Have a good luck with all your drafts, and the best of luck this season. Take it easy,
Sounds
Pete.
good.
See you, man. All right, Wolfpack. We'll now hit the rest of the mailbag. Whatever you got for us. Doesn't look like we have too many, but let's see what we got. My man, Chris, good to see you, man. Back boys, what up? We missed you this morning for the sleeper stream, but glad to have you popping in on here. I'm doing an underdraft. Were you in the same draft as us? I wonder if you what your name is. I'd love to compete against you. Great to see you though, Chris. Raiders had exactly that Waller and Gronk red zone role. He's already talked about how this offense is going to be good for his big ass to get into the touchdown more. So love to see it. But good to see you, Chris. Thanks for tuning in. And that kind of wraps us up, Wolfpack. So if you enjoyed this, you want to test out Underdog, code RSJ will get you up to $100 deposit match. So that can be a great way to help you out there. Awesome, Wolfpack. So that code RSJ, $100 deposit match could be great. We'll see you next time. The Wolf of Fantasy Sheet. Be a wolf, guys. Later.